Well, welcome to the Church Office podcast.
My name's Gavin Smith, and if you're joining us on video, then here's a little wave.
We're excited to have Nigel Ring join us.
I've never actually heard the word wicked and accountant put in the same sentence.
One of the questions that I had from a workshop that I was doing, and they were taking a group of young people away on a residential trip,
Yes.
and saying, we've got our regular safeguarding in place, but we're going to a different location with sleepovers, with youth workers going.
Yeah.
Give me some top tips here on just things of think about this, go, do some further diligence. What are those gut reactions from you in this?
So I suppose the first one and the most important one is I'm taking that we're talking about a residential trip here. We've got young people overnight.
Yes.
Because obviously a day trip is slightly different. But we're talking about a residential trip, the golden rule that you must not break is no adults in dorms or in tents with children.
Yeah.
Okay. Absolutely not under any circumstances.
Yeah.
What that does do, though, is it means we do need to think about what does security look like? What does site security look like?
Yeah.
Can people just come in? So, for example, if we're going to a site, but it's an open, maybe it's an under canvas camp. How do we actually make sure that we haven't got people who shouldn't be coming onto site? What would we do about that? How do we make sure that all the young people have stayed on site when they're supposed to? So we might even need to think about having nighttime supervision, for example. Someone who's out and about and keeping an eye on things overnight. I know that's a real burden. But we've got to think about that security. Now, obviously, if we're sort of more of a dormitory type arrangement, that's a little bit easier because we've got a building. We can, the doors can be locked so that people can't come in from outside, but fire exits are still available and what have you. So it's a bit easier then. Obviously, separation of boys and girls. Real contentious issue is around transgender at the moment. That's a really difficult issue. What I would say is have clarity about policy. Again, we need to be really careful. There's no kind of hard and fast rules here. It is about context. But as a general rule, we don't have to work with that person's choice of identity. Simply because someone identifies as female doesn't mean that boy can sleep in a dorm with a group of girls. Now we may need to be thinking about how do we manage that? How do we manage sleeping arrangements? How do we manage sort of bathing arrangements? Those kinds of things. Obviously, we don't want to be antagonistic. We don't want to be creating problems for people. We want to be as inclusive as we can be, but we don't have to compromise those principles. Our first priority is the safety of everybody who is there, and we work around that.
That's useful, isn't it? Let me jump in there because it's actually doing some more work on the venue. And there could be a temptation, isn't there, to drive down the price to get a cheap venue that actually isn't suitable. It doesn't meet the requirements that we're talking about.
Really important.
And so that is so important. And actually to pay a little bit extra, but we're happier with the security, we're happier with the arrangements for residential care.
Exactly.
It's so important, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. Thinking through how we supervise things, if you've got a group of young people in dorms, you can't put an adult in the dorm with them, but we do want adults in the vicinity so that if there's an issue, how do young people raise a concern if something's happening that shouldn't be? Lots and lots of issues coming through now on youth camps around young people accessing material that they shouldn't during unsupervised times. So over this summer there was a real noticeably marked increase in the number of calls that we had around those kinds of things. So really thinking through
and children sharing information with each other.
Exactly. All that kind of thing. And right through to some young people, so then arranging to meet people that they'd made contact with online when they went out on a trip on, so really thinking about those things. I think as well, obviously this applies more to the older end of the sort of children's spectrum, so the teenagers, more
Isn't it?
primary school age children. But I think really important that we're talking to young people about risks, what we're doing to keep them safe, and really creating an environment where we're saying, look, if there's anything at all that doesn't feel right, please come and talk to us. These are people you can come and talk to. So we're not putting the responsibility on them to protect themselves. We're taking responsibility for that, but we are creating very clear routes and very open communication about, look, if there's anything at all that's making you feel uncomfortable, anything that doesn't feel right and what have you, please come and talk to us about it. I think turning around the narrative from this is about snitching on your mates to this is about how we care for each other well. And really kind of embedding that narrative that we all have a responsibility to look out for each other, to protect each other, and to support each other. So those kinds of things, record carefully, as you would if you were a meeting in the church building. So your safeguarding concerns still there. If your safeguarding lead isn't on site, make sure that you have a nominated safeguarding contact at the site. And of course, the other thing is, those records are still the church's records or the organization's records. So at the end of camp, please don't just stick them in an envelope and take them home with you. They need to go centrally to wherever you store your safeguarding records.
And if you're using like multiple rooms for residents, who was in each room, who were the leaders, all of those things, all those details really make a difference. And so don't just bin them after the event, we're done. It's
And I think clearly communicating risk assessment, quite often one of the things that we say is we do the risk assessment and we kind of assume that everybody's read it because we circulate it to them, but actually making sure that people understand what are the rules here, what are the things that we've set in place, why does it matter? I think one of the real big challenges, and this is perhaps more of a challenge for organizations who are sort of running camps. Obviously, there's a lot of organizations in the UK. They run camps over the summer. So it's not a church, which is slightly different. But, we still have a responsibility to make sure that our volunteers and our staff are competent. And so really thinking about training. If what you're doing is squeezing in 10, 15 minutes at the beginning of the camp with the leaders, you really are not doing the safeguarding justice. You cannot get across what you need to in that amount of time. So really thinking about how do we convey this information? How do we make sure that everybody's competent? So one of the things that we do quite a lot now is that we'll do an e-learning module that people can do in their own time. Then when it comes, say, for example, to the start of camp or to a training day for the camp, we might look at a couple of case studies together, but the bulk of the learning's already been done. And
that's useful.
People to apply it. So really thinking about these kinds of things.
The training side of things is great, isn't it? Because we're thinking about the details of the event, but actually, the training and so providing that to our volunteers is so important. So lots to think about here. I mean, we've gone back and forth on, and parents don't like it as well, whether you take the phones off them, going back to that point about sharing content. We've not had that issue, but actually, young people can get quite anxious now without their phone. And
absolutely.
So parents want them to have their phone to be able to contact them, but it does play against you in so many other ways. So it's you really do have to work this through. How do we
control what they're doing with their phones? How do we know they're not taking photos of the others while they're getting changed? It's just kind of thinking these things through. And again, I think being clear about what the principles are. Talk to young people. They're actually a lot more switched on than sometimes we give them credit for. And I think having these open conversations, obviously in an age appropriate way. Obviously, but actually having open conversation with them, and this is why this is important for us, and these are the things that we're doing to make sure everybody's include the young people in that process.
That's great, Paul. So much help there. Honestly, if you haven't signed up to Christian Safeguarding Service, then please consider doing that.